Hello and welcome. I'm Marilyn Ivy and I'm so glad you've joined me for this workshop. Today we're in the gallery looking at an early Monet in the Kimball collection for inspiration. We're going to look at some of the ways that Monet invites us into this scene and his painting techniques. First of all, his composition. He has many diagonal lines that lead your eye deep into space. In his skies, you see his virtuoso brushwork with fuzzy clouds, and then in the foreground, the calligraphic marks for individual rocks. He also has a color palette that creates a mood with cool colors to suggest the rainy day. The colors that you see in the sky are reflected in the beach, and this unifies the painting and suggests a mood and creates harmony. We also have dynamic waves that move forward toward the foreground. You could almost get your feet wet in the froth. We've got a lot of different things that you could look closely at in this painting online by zooming in, and I look forward to our painting activity inspired by this painting. Let's get ready to paint. I've got the materials that were in the kit out. So I have a Prang watercolor set, the Turner Design white gouache, a mixing tray, a variety of brushes, and Canson watercolor paper. I've taped it down to a hard surface, which is easier to paint on, and you'll see while I'm working on this how I take advantage of that, but you don't have to have it taped down. You'll still be able to get the same kinds of effects. We're going to get started with a simplified kind of seascape. You can work from your own photo resource or from your imagination. I have a simplified seascape inspired by our Monet. So the very first thing I want to do is to moisten the colors that are in the watercolor set. We want to activate those because they're forever able to be reactivated, but when they're hard to mix up. So I've gotten water in all of these colors, and I've created a sketch of my scene, just main shapes. Then the next thing I'm needing to do, because I'm going to start with a sky, is to mix some sky colors in my palette. So I've got this started, and I want to begin with what's going to be my darkest clouds. I'm making a cloudy sky, and you can make any kind of sky you're seeing. It's entirely your own. And I'm mixing the blue and brown in the set to create this gray. You can make richer grays by mixing colors, and I'm trying those out on a little scrap piece of paper. And so I'm working to enrich that color. Okay, now that's a little stronger. I'm liking that. And now I've got another similar color with a little bit more blue. It's quite a bit lighter. Oh, I haven't added my gouache to the palette yet. I want about 1/2 inch. This paint's going to go a long way, and it's going to modify our colors in some soft and subtle ways. So I'm going to take one of my brushes and add a little bit of this white. I'm really not lightening the color very much. It just softens it somehow. Purists really don't use opaque white at all with their watercolors. It's all transparent. But I've had fun experimenting with these different effects. So there's my bluish color. And now I want a really light one. So you can see how I'm kind of balancing the two colors. All right, I'm all set with that. Now here's my first trick. I want to make sure that my 3/4 inch wash brush is clean. No paint on it. It looks like I've got quite a bit of paint on it. Okay, so here's our first trick. I'm going to turn the paper upside down for painting the sky. And I'm going to begin with just clear water right along the horizon line and right along the cliff face. This has still just a little bit of that water, but it won't hurt because it's going to be nice. As I get toward what will become the upper clouds, I'm using some more swirly strokes. And now I'm going to go in with my lightest color right along the horizon. And then I'm going to use some of that blue color, and I can skip around and leave some white, or I'd like some of that. And then finally my darkest gray. I'm going to go back and forth a little bit with this blue. So I've got some areas, that was a little too wet. Use our extra paper towel to remove some of that water right along the edge. Let's try that again. And of course, at this point, you can have your paper horizontal on the table, and if you prefer not to have those kinds of runs, you can avoid that. And just a little bit of this. Okay, we want to be careful that areas don't run together, and so I'm going to skip to another area and dampen the beach. Do you remember how Monet created a sense of unity with repeating colors? I am just going to use that 3/4 inch wash brush again and go back to some of my darkest colors that I used in the sky. And I want those to just flow in for the beach. Just a little bit of the blue along the shore. Okay, while that is drying, I've got a little bit of a hard edge here. I'm going to moisten that just a little bit. Okay, while that is drying, I'm going to be mixing up. I'm going to use my shader brush for some mixing and create my green for the waves. And let's try it out on my test card. Okay, that's going to be really nice for the lightest color. And for this, I'm just using the green and brown, and that dulls it down just a bit. So I like using color combinations. You could also use violet with the green to make a very nice green. Let's see how this is for our darker green. Woo, that's way dark. But if you get a color a little bit too dark a value, you can always add water. There we go. Okay, so I like the idea of having just a little bit of my sea color here in this foreground. But for creating my ocean scene, I'm going to be using this shader brush. And then as the waves are far apart, in the foreground, I want them very close together in the background. And so this brush is going to help me paint the picture by manipulating the strokes. They're about the same distance apart. You can see a bit of a dry brush mark there. That can actually create some wave effects. And I can keep going back with that dark green to emphasize contrast with the sky. You can see a lot of variation in the greens that I have so far, and the photo that you're working from or from your imagination, you can create that just as you like. And these waves are going to be closer together in the distance and then farther apart as we come in toward the shore. And now I'm going to use that lighter green on these last few. And I'm going to let some of this just kind of paint itself. All right, so now I can kind of touch up a few places, and I really like how that part of the beach is looking, and this could have just a bit more color. Now we're going to use some of that white gouache all by itself, and you want to make sure your brushes are really rinsed out in between these different areas. So now I'm going to get that really thick white gouache on the brush, and I'm going to create some of those wave effects, make them a little scallopy on the bottom, and don't spread it out too much. And keep it impasto, rather thick. And a little scallopy on the bottom. Again, a bit of dry brush, you can let that skip out. Oh, here's a good place. It's really whitest where you've left a skip place for the wave. And you could work your way back with a little bit more of that if you like. And then I'm going to use it again on the shore for my little residue of waves here and there. I'm holding my brush further back to have less control and let it kind of skip. And then you can make it even wider along the edge of the wave by going back. And we're going to go back to that gouache in just a minute. But right now I think our sky and shore are dry enough to create our cliff and some rocks here in the foreground. So now I'm keeping the harmony going in the painting by continuing to use some of my brown and blue. Use just a little bit of orange to get a bit more of that burnt sienna effect. Now we're going to create a stronger color here, but in that same color family. That's almost black. And of course I can wet that just a little bit as I need to. I'm using the number 8 shader, and I'm going to create some different textures on the rocks. And that blocky effect is going to help me suggest these rocks. And I'm going to make a few down here as well. And then I want to pull in some lighter colors. Rocks are far away, so they don't have to be too exactly detailed. And then I've got these two that are in the foreground. Okay, now I want to switch to my number 6 brush. This is the one that came in your set. And I want to really play with some of those calligraphic kinds of marks, a la Monet. And I'm going to create a few here in the foreground as well. All right, now I have 2 paper towels here that I've actually torn an irregular edge on, and I'm going to use that as a stencil for my froth. I'm going to dip my toothbrush in the water and into the gouache. And then, using my paper towel stencils, prevent it from stray marks. And I'm just going to create some of that spray. And that was just a little bit wet. I'm going to do the whole process again. That's probably the most fun part of the whole painting. But wait, we're not finished. We're going to do that same thing for our rocky effects on the shore. So I'm changing colors with the brush, and I'm actually just going to use these same stencils. Something like that. And I'm dipping my brush into the brown. And I can kind of check it out to see if I like what's happening. And when you've taken your tape off very carefully, voila, you have a spontaneous effect of sea and sky. I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration. Contact me if you have any questions, and I'll see you at 2 o'clock on Wednesday.